Crazy.
I don't blame you. Good evening. We're learning tonight Daf Tzadi Gimel, getting to the end of the Masechta. It's Hashem in another, 12 blot? Yeah, Daf Kuf Hey is going to be the last blot. On that note, for those of you who have yet, I think almost everyone here has done so. For those of you who are joining the Siyum, please find a way to get me $20, and we will make sure that we will have some excellent food. And let us get started. Yesterday, we began our conversation on Daf Tzadi Beis about whether or not there are times that a mechitza can cause a problem instead of a mechitza only trying to help. So normally when we're building a sukkah, all right, so the walls are a matir. When you have an eruv, building a mechitza is a matir. But there are some cases, or maybe I should say, it's a question mark. The Gemara presents 4 or 5, I think 4 cases. We learned one yesterday, and we're going to learn another one today. We're on 2 lines from the bottom of Tzadi Beis and Beis. Says the Gemara as follows. Amar le Rava le Abaye, v'lo matzinu mechitza le'isur. We know that there are times that a mechitza can cause for a problem. In what case can a mechitza cause for a problem? Says the Gemara, v'ha'itmar sikech al gabe achsadra. Let's say that you had some type of prose door, as some of the Meforshim explain, some type of pathway between 2 walls, and sheyesh la tzimin, and there are these uprights that are standing on the outsides of the wall. So the halacha is kshera. If you put schach on top of that, it counts. However, the ilu hishva pitzimeha, if you take a piece of wood and you sandwich the posts so that you have the wall, 2 posts, and then you sandwich it on the other side, then you've ruined those pitzimin. So says the Gemara, psula. So we see here that making a wall causes a problem. Answers the Gemara, Amar le Abaye, first of all, l'didik sheva. First of all, I don't agree with you in general with your argument because basically I would say that sukkah is still kosher. Yes, you ruined the pitzimin, but you added a wall. L'didcha. And according to you, it's not that you added a mechitza; it's siluk mechitzos. You ruined one of the walls by adding this wall. So you can't say that you adding a wall causes problems. You caused a problem by adding another wall by ruining a wall. So it's not a pure case of adding a wall. Then the Gemara tries again. 4 lines down, Tzadi Gimel Amud Aleph. Amar le Rabba bar Rav Chanan le Abaye. V'lo matzinu mechitza le'isur. We have another example where mechitza causes a problem. V'hatanya bayis shechetzio mekura, shechetzio eno mekura. Let's say you have a house that's 100 feet long. The first 50 feet have a roof, and the second 50 feet don't. So right where the roof ends, we have a principle in halacha called pi tikra yored v'sosein. So then that means that at that point, it's as if a wall drops. And because the wall drops, says the Gemara, gefanim kan muter lizroa kan. It's permissible to have the gefanim in one side and to grow something on the other side where beyond the wall drop, because no problem, you're in 2 different reshuyos. Then says the Gemara, this is where the problem comes in. Ilu hishva es kirio, if you were to fill out the roof entirely, then we wouldn't have the principle of pitikr yord v'sosim applying, and then we see that the additional ceiling is going to cause for kilayim. So says the Gemara, by the way, just a chiddush here, we were talking about mechitzas, now we're talking about adding a roof. Because adding the roof here, is that the same thing as a mechitza? Would we say that adding a roof is the same as a mechitza? That's a good question to be asked in Lumdus. So anyways, if you add the roof here and now the whole house is entirely roofed, then you're not allowed to plant the zraim, even if it were to have been the same spot for when there was no roof. Amar le, so then we see our problem. We see that we added part of the ceiling and it caused for a problem. Says the Gemara, same answer as before. Amar le, hasam siluk mechitzosu. When you finished out the ceiling, you removed your wall that was the pitikra yored v'soseim wall, and therefore nothing left. What are you supposed to do? Nothing left, and you ruined it. You ruined a wall. So again, we don't yet have a case scenario where a mechitza has on its own caused a problem by it being added. Next. Same question yet again, but with other Mari Makomos. Shalach le Rava le Abaye biyad Rav Shamei bar Zeira. Rava sent a question to Abaye at the hands of Rav Shamei bar Zeira. He sent a messenger. V'lo matzinu mechitza le'isur. I can show you a case where we see that a mechitza causes a problem. Tanya, we have a brisa, very important that we note that this is a brisa, as we'll see shortly in the Gemara. So this brisa says the following: Yesh b'mechitzos hakerem lahakil ulahachmir. There are times that a mechitza, as it relates to a kerem, that it could be mekel, and in one case it could be machmir. Ketzad, how does this work out? Kerem hanatua ad ikr mechitza. Let's say that you have a grapevine, and the grapevine goes all the way up to a wall. So then, zorea me ikr mechitza va'ilach, then immediately on the other side of that wall, it's mutter to plant. So we see the mechitza. That's a big kula. Shilu ein sham mechitza. Had there not been a mechitza there, well, right now you're planting like 6 inches apart from one another. Because if this is my mechitza right here, I have a mechitza. I have my grapevines up to here. I put up a mechitza. I can plant right here on the other side. Technically, we don't allow it for other reasons, as we'll see soon. But technically, ledina midoraisa, we're allowed to plant right away. What if there wasn't a wall? That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, "She'ilu ein sham mechitza marchik dalet amos v'zareah." So the wall is a kula, because with the wall, I only have to distance a few inches. Without the wall, I would have had to distance dalet amos. V'zeu mechitza sakerem lahakel. And this is that's the lenient version of a wall. Ulahachmir ketzad. What is the wall that causes for problems as it relates to kiloi hakerem? Says the Gemara as follows. Last of the short lines, 1/3 of the way down. Tzadi Gimel Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Ulahachmir ketzad. What's a case where a wall causes a problem for kiloi hakerem? Answers the Gemara, Hayamashuch min hakosel yud aleph ama. If you see that the planting, there's no vegetation planted from a fence until 11 amos out, you should not plant anything there. Lo yavi zera l'sham. So again, you have a wall and you have bare space, and then you have 11 amos later, 12 amos later, then you have more vegetation. But in that 11 amos space, you should not, lo yavi zera l'sham, you should not plant there. She'il male ein mechitza, marchik dalet amos v'zareah. Had it not been for that wall, we would have simply said you could plant dalet amos out. Yet here we see that the wall causes for a chumrah, because instead of planting 4 out, we can't plant even 11 out. And we'll see why in a moment. So that's the Gemara's question. We see from here that had it been that there was no mechitza, all I would have had to do is push out dalet amos. Now that there is a mechitza, I have to push out 11 amos. So we see in a case where mechitza is la'isr. Good question. Asks the Gemara. And for methodological purposes of psak, this Gemara is also very important. We've seen this a few times in Shas already. Omar lei uletamech osva mimas nisin. You're asking good, but you should have asked from a Mishnah, not from a Brisa, right? We said that this question that came from Rava was asked from a Brisa and not from a Mishnah. So Rashi, the second to last skinny line of Rashi, very short Rashi, but again, as it relates to the methodology of psak, it's important to know these things. Rashi says, "Osvan mimas nisin." You should have asked from a Mishnah, "De alima leakshuye tfemi brisa," because a brisa is not as strong as a Mishnah. And part of the history to this is that a lot of the brisas that we have nowadays, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had access to them. He just didn't include them. So it's like learning the Rif. What the Rif doesn't say is equally as important to what the Rif does say. So why didn't Rabbi Yehuda Nasi include this brisa? So l'chora, he didn't hold it to be on the same caliber. So when it comes to psak, we also, it's a second class ranking that we put brisa second. So the Gemara says, you're asking good. Omar le'ula ta'amech, according to your rationale, I hear your question, but osvan mimas nisin, you should have asked from a Mishnah. So we'll learn this next Mishnah, which is basically the same question from another source. And this Mishnah is about 5 or 6 lines long, and then we will get to our question there. Let's see what this Mishnah says. We actually learned this Mishnah once before. Where was it? It was referenced on Daf Gimel, exactly 90 blot ago. Wow, that's a big accomplishment. 90 blot, it's a big deal. 90 blot, 3 months ago. What month was that? Whatever, it was all COVID. It doesn't make a difference. So says the Gemara as follows, 2 lines into the wide. Says the Gemara, second of the wide lines. What is this Mishnah from which we should have asked this better question, because Mishnahs are stronger than Brisos? Says the Gemara, D'tanan karachas hakerem, if you have a bald spot in a kerem, in a field, so Beis Shammai omrim kaf dalet amos, the bald spot has to be at least 24 amos in order to be able to plant anything in the very center of the bald spot. Beis Hillel omrim tes zayin, all you need is that smaller amount of 16 amos. Mechol hakerem, if you have a bare spot not in the middle, but at the edge of your field, on the outer part of your field, so how much space do you need between that and the fence? Beis Shammai omrim tes zayin ama. This is all lower shitas. Beis Shammai says only 16 amos. So Beis Hillel omrim yud beis, you need only 12. Okay. Now let's define each of these things. What's karachas hakerem? I've already defined it a little bit. And what is the other one? Be'ezavi karachas hakerem. What does the bald spot look like? Kerem shecharav emsa iso. So like when people lose their hair, they lose typically at the crown of their head in the middle. It's a bald spot in the middle of the field. So that's what the Gemara says here as well. It's kerem. It's a vineyard shecharav emsa iso, where the very middle of it became barren, where all of the vegetation started to die. So imein sham tes zayin ama, if it doesn't have 16 amos in diameter in the very middle of the bald spot, lo yavi zera l'sham, you're not allowed to bring more. Hayusham tezayin, if in fact there was 16, then no sin look de avodah. So you give 4 amos away from the vegetation itself, and then you can start planting in the very center of Zoreas amos, or you can plant the rest. Now, all of that is not our shiloh because we're not talking about the center. We remember our shiloh, we were talking about the edges. Remember the fence issue, the fence getting close to the vegetation. So now for the rest of this Mishnah, this is going to be our shiloh. Remember we said that that Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel have a machlokes in regards to the borders where there is no vegetation. So what's the mechol hakerem? Says the Gemara, bein hakerem legeder, between the fence and the grape and the vineyard. And there we said, according to Beis Hillel, shim ein sham yud beis ama lo yavi zer l'sham. But hayu sham yud beis ama, if in fact there were 12 amos from the edge of the vegetation up to the fence, in that case, no sein lo kedei avodas of zareas amosar. So says the Gemara, you should have asked your question from here. It's the same question. It's the same exact question, which is why is it that we can't plant in that space that's either 12 amos or so from the vegetation? Then had there been no wall 12 amos away, then I could have just planted dalat amos away with no wall. It would have been better. So what do we see from here? We see that a mechitza is le'isser. The mechitza causes a problem. So says the Gemara, no, let's explain. You're right that there is a wall there, and you're right that it looks problematic, but basically there are some fundamental aspects that we need to look at when we have kiloi hakerem. Elahasam lavhainu taima, in both of those cases it's referring to kol dalet amos legabe hakerem avodas hakerem. This is a well-known idea that the avodas hakerem, the space with which one is going to use to plant, is 4 amos away. No matter what, you're always going to be 4 amos unless there's a mechitza right next to you. But if there's no mechitza right next to you, you need at least 4 amos. That's the working space to plant. Legabe geder, and next to the wall as well, we need to create a space next to the wall. Delomis dira'an afkure mifkar. We don't plant right next to the wall. You're allowed to plant alskila keren, but you're not allowed for another reason. Machlokes rishonim here. Is it because the wall may fall? Because when you dig near the wall, you gotta make sure you're not destabilizing the earth underneath, or is it a question of possible nezikin for your neighbor? Okay, the shilas in the Rishonim, these are shitas in the Rishonim. So the 4 next to the kerem we got, and the 4 next to the fence we got. The beini, what's left in between? If there in fact is 4, you're allowed to plant, and that's 12. 4 plus 4, and then if in the middle we have another 4, it's 12. Good, you're allowed to plant according to Beis Hillel. Be'ilo lo chashivan. So the Gemara says it's not really because of the mechitza, and you can't say that the mechitza is really teaching us that a mechitza is le'isser. It's not really true. It's just that the mechitza brings with it a side din that you need an extra dalet amos, and that's why the Gemara says as it does. The Gemara's question was asked here and answered. So basically, we have yet to find a case where mechitza is le'isser. We're now going to move on to a new case. We're 2/3 of the way down. We've been speaking recently not about carpethios, other than slight references, but what we're going to be speaking about is carpethios 3 in a row, 3 of these larger open areas that are usually not ro'i l'dira, and how they intersect with one another. I've drawn some crude pictures here on the board to kind of just basic drawings to help us understand a little bit about what's going on. So it says the Gemara as follows, 2/3 of the way down. Amar Rav Yehuda, the Amora, Talmud Rav and Shmuel. Amar Rav Yehuda, Gimel karfifos, zebet tzadze. If you have 3 karpefim, one after the next, linear in one line. Vishnaim hachitzonim megufafim. The 2 outer ones have borders. I'll show you what that means in a minute. V'amtzani eino megufaf. And the middle one doesn't have megufaf. So that's this picture here. Yeah. So if you have this picture here shows there's 3 karpefim in a row, 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you're standing in one of the outer ones and you look toward the middle karpef, what do you see? Well, you see the bordering walls that make the smaller unit. What makes this unit smaller? So this guy, when he looks, he has 4 walls: wall 1, wall 2, wall 3, and these 2 extensions of the wall here, that causes for a problem. What does the guy in the middle see? No walls at all. His karpef is totally open. So that's the perspective here at first that the Gemara is speaking about. Let's just keep it here in case you can see it on the screen for just a moment. So that's what the Gemara says here, that I'll read it again. Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda, Gimel karpefos, zebet tzadze, v'shnaim hachitzonim megufafim. These 2, they see the border walls. The guy in the middle, when he looks out, he doesn't see anything in his karpef. So then in that case, and it adds, the case adds, v'yachid b'zeh v'yachid b'zeh, and there's a person who lives in each one of these things. What's the din? Naaseh kishayara. We learned about this earlier in the Masechta, that this is treated like a shayara. It's treated like a caravan, and a caravan is a minimum of 3 people, and all of them could live happily ever after in the same space. But nothing lehen kol tzorkan, they're good. They're good to go. They can share all the space. Perfect. The force me to take out the next word vadai. What about emtsai megufav? What if the middle guy is the one who sees the boundary walls? As you can see in this picture, the middle guy, when he looks around, so he sees, if he's standing here, when he looks around, he sees, well, this wall was complete and this wall is complete, so he's totally surrounded. The other two, they don't see any border walls as they look into the middle because their space was smaller than the middle space. So that's the next case. It says the Gemara, 7 lines up. Emtsai megufaf, if the person in the middle sees the boundary walls, the shnai machitzonim einan megufafin, and the people on the outsides don't see any walls to limit them in. The yachid bezeh, yachid bezeh, yachid bezeh, and there are people living in each one. Then each of them get their own base assignment. They don't get kol tzorcha. They don't get any like special treatment. They're not treated like a shayara. So then the Gemara says, what would happen if echad bazeh ve'echad bazeh ve'shnayim be'emtza? Let's say it wasn't one person in each space. Let's say that there were 2 people in the middle space, right? We have to be talking about this case because they're limited here. What would happen if there was 2 people here in the middle? Mahu. Ilahachi nafke tlasahabu. If these 2 guys in the middle go to one side, then there's 3 on the side. The ilahachi nafke, if they go to the other side, then still tlasahabu. They would make 3. That's a shayara. 3 is a shayara. 3 is a caravan. Then they get more leniencies. O dilma, or perhaps chad lahacha nafik v'chad lahacha nafik. And maybe had there been 2, one could go to each side, and there's no shayara. How do we look at the people in the middle if there are 2 people in the middle carpet? And if you want to say that that's true, that one might go in either direction, then shnayim bazeh, let's reverse the case. Let's say that there's 2 people in the outer carpet and 2 people in this outer carpet and 1 guy in the middle. Then no matter where he goes, you can't split one person in half. The one guy's going to go somewhere. Then he should create a shayara just by moving to any one side. So then says the Gemara, Mahu, what should be the din? Hacha vadai. If he goes to one side, there will be 3. And if he goes to the other side, there will be 3. So definitely there should be a caravan. Ma, what's the din? Udilma, or should we say, Emar lahacha nafik, ve'emar lahacha nafik. We don't know which way he's going to go, so we should just leave it alone. We don't know. So then says the Gemara, v'hilcha sabayan lakula. In all of these cases, we will be lenient. So that means that even in this case over here, where the person can't see the walls, we would be lenient if there were 2 people in each side, because he would then create a caravan. Good. Let's move on to yet another sugya. We are on the very bottom line, last few words, Sadi Gimel Amud Aleph. Another sugya, Amar Rav Chizda. What happens if the walls that we have are not all made of the same material? Now, the case that we're dealing with here is where I have my yard, and your property next to me is elevated a little bit. So there's a fence that only really helps me. You can't see it. Your property is elevated above mine.
Wall.
What?
Sounds like a retaining wall.
Yes, exactly. So my wall, that is my yard wall, is your retaining wall. So that's what the Gemara calls this here. Gidud chamisha. If you're, well, I'm going to use your language. That's perfect. Gidud chamisha. If you're retaining wall, just Rashi here says it's chatzer. Rashi. What? Please. Not for Psachim, but you can take the next 10 block b'simcha rava. Gidud chamisha. So the is that pasnish? So Rashi says, Dibra Hamaschel Gidude Chamisha. What is the Gidud? So Rashi says, Chatzer Shekar Ka'isa Goa Chamisha Tfachim. At the side of my property, it's 5 Tfachim tall. And again, that's your retaining wall. And Umechitza Chamisha. And the next 5 Tfachim is wall that I added in order for me to have 10. So says the Gemara, in such a case where the walls are split in half, the bottom is the Gidud, just dirt, and the top is a specifically added wall. Ein mitztarfin achu o kula begidud o kula b'mechitza. The wall doesn't count. What was the concern? Right, cite the Rishonim. The concern here is that someone might think that you only need a 5 tefach wall because they see that Karesh only added 5 tefachim above the dirt. Where's your 10 tefach wall? So therefore, the Rishonim say you're not allowed to make a wall that's split into different material. It has to be made out of the same material. We'll see halfway down on the page that not everybody agrees with this. Okay, let's analyze. Meisive, is that really true that you can't have a wall that's made out of two materials? Shtei chatzeros zu lamala mizu. We have a brisa that says as follows: if you have two chatzeros, one above the other, of course it doesn't mean literally one above the other, because then it wouldn't be a chatzer. But it's where my property is at elevation 0, and yours is elevated 5 tfachim to my right. So then in that case, the brisa writes, the Elyona gva mina tachtona asara tvachim. Yours is even 10 tefach above. So, sheyesh ba gidud chamisha umechitza chamisha, or specifically our case, where the bottom wall is 5 tefachim of dirt, and the next 5 tefachim is made out of mechitza. What do we see? Me'arvin shnayim. What does it mean, me'arvin shnayim? It means that we're in different reshuyos. It means that your half and half wall is a wall. If it says me'arvin shnayim ve'in me'arvin echad, it means that we're in different reshuyos. We have to be ma'arev separately if we're gonna make an eruv. So then ma'arvin shnayim ve'in me'arvin echad. So that's already our kasha, but we're going to finish out the bride. So pachos mikan, if the wall was less than that, ma'arvin echad ve'in me'arvin shnayim. This is a kasha in the sheet of Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda, you wanted to say that if a wall is made out of 5 tefach of dirt, and on top of that 5 tefach of mechitza, you wanted to say ein mitzdarf, and that's not a wall. Yeah, we see a mafurish brisa where it actually uses your language. Your language was gidud chamisha, mechitza chamisha, and we said there ma'arvin shnayim. So we see that it is a wall because that wall separates us so sharply in halacha that we cannot even make an eruv together. Rava says, no, what does Rav Chizda mean? Mo de Rav Chizda b'tachtona, hol v'ro pnei asara. No, from the perspective, and this is really important for us to understand for the rest of the Gemara. From my perspective, in my yard, when I look around me, I have 10 tefachim. I have 10 tefachim. By me, it's the bottom 5 is dirt and the top 5 is what I added. But klape me in the lower property, it's 10 tefachim for me. You on the other side, you on the elevated property, you may not see any wall if it's a 10 tefach retaining wall. So that's how the Gemara answers in the name of Rav Chizda, Rava answering for Rav Chizda. So says the Gemara, Ihachi, then I don't understand. If what you're saying is that the bottom wall has a real 10 tefachim, then tachtona te'arev shnayim, v'lo te'arev echad. It should have been the case that the lower property, like we said earlier, should be totally severed, and we would have to make different Eruvin because that wall's a real wall. But Elyona, lo te'arev lo echad v'lo shnayim. But if the wall was 10 tefachim, and you are on that elevated property, you have no wall between you and me. We should not be able to be ma'arev like that. Lo se'arev, lo echad, v'lo shnayim. But that doesn't work at all. So the language of the Mishnah doesn't work that way because the language of the Mishnah at the top of the page tells us what to do. The language there says, pachos mikan, if it's less, ma'arvin echad, ve'ein ma'arvin shnayim. That doesn't work out. So Amar Rabba explains. Amar Rabba Bar Ula, he says, no, the top wall has a little bit of extension that's kind of protruding, ad eser amos, but it has up to and not greater than a 10 amos, so therefore it's like a Pesach. So it says the Gemara, hold on one second, Rabbi Bar Ula, if that's what you're going to say, if that's true, then the Seifa doesn't make sense. If you're saying that really your wall is 10 tefachim, but it's just it's gifufe, it's just partial, it's a partial wall and not a full wall, and it's less than 10 amos, so that it's still a Pesach, then I don't understand the Seifa. Ihachi, about 1/3 of the way down. Ihachi ema Seifa, the Seifa doesn't make sense. What does it say? Pachos mikan, if the wall's less than 10, so then me'arvin echad ve'in me'arvin shnayim, it should have, why would it say me'arvin echad ve'in me'arvin shnayim, that we should be joined as one? It should be ibaya chad ta'arv, ibaya trei ta'arv. You could have done either way, because your wall is only a partial wall. It's not quite 10 tefachim. We're not totally severed from one another. We're not totally connected. You should be able to choose what type of eruv. Yet the Mishnah doesn't say that. The Mishnah says, 8 lines from the top of the page, just looking back up, why would it say that? So says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, Beredu Rava, Kigon Shenifritza Tachtona B'Milua LeElyona. We're talking about a case where, as it relates to the bottom, where the wall's totally blown open. Okay, but Ihachi, Tachtona Chad Te'arev, Trei Lo Te'arev. If the wall's totally blown open, then the lower Chaser should be able to make one eruv because the wall is totally blown open. And Trey, you shouldn't be able to make separate eruv if the wall is totally blown open from my lower property to yours. And Elyona, from the other property, Ibaya Trey Ta'arv, Ibaya Chad Ta'arv. It should have been that they should have been able to pick which one because there's no wall there. They could look down there and see each other clearly. So it says the Gemara, you're right, in Nachanami, that's correct. And how do we solve the problem of the language in our brisa not matching both the Elyona and the Tachton? Says the Gemara, Anu Kimta. How do we understand the line in the Mishnah which says me'arvin shnayim ve'ein me'arvin echad? Says the Gemara, Inochanami, you're correct. V'chiktani pachos mikan me'arvin echad ve'ein me'arvin shnayim atachtona. That was only talking about the lower property, and that's why the language makes sense. The Mishnah, it's not a Mishnah, it's a brisa that speaks about this. That was only talking about the tachtona, and that's why the language said me'arvin echad ve'ein me'arvin shnayim. Now we started out this sugya with Rav Chizda, who said that a wall that's half and half cannot be mitztarev. And now we see a dissenting opinion. Halfway down, the Gemara says as follows: Darash Meremar. Meremar was arguing with Rav Chizda. Gidud chamishu mechitza chamishu mitztarfen. I don't agree with you. If you have a wall that's half dirt and half mechitza, no problem at all. It can be mitztarev. Says the Gemara. The Mefarshim struggle with this line a little bit about its context. Does it belong here? Says the Gemara. Ashkechei Ravina the Rav Acha berei the Rava. Ravina, who was 2 generations later than Rava, and he's talking to someone who's probably much, much older than him. Ashkechei Ravina, the Rav Acha berei de Rava. This was the son of Rava. Rava was 4th century Amora. So this is his son. So that's 5th century Amora, Rav Acha. And Ravina was 6th and 7th. He was much older. He's probably 40, 50 years older than him. So he's looking at one of the great Rabbanim in town, and he said, Amar le tani mar midi b'mechitza. Did your master Rava, did he teach you any brises about mechitza? Amar le, lo, no. We don't know what he's talking. I mean, it almost belongs in brackets, right? We have to look back at the Diukei Sofrim to see at the Diukei Sofrim to see how this got in here. Either.
Agreed. This is all made up.
Yeah, that's possible that Rabbi skipped Eruvin. So says the Gemara, V'hilchasa, how do we paskin? We paskin like Meremar. V'hilchasa gidud chamisha mechitza chamisha mitztarfen. So we're going to stop here and we'll pick up from Bai Rav Hoshaya tomorrow. It's tomorrow Wednesday. So still one blot Wednesday. So we'll do Daf Tzadi Dal and Hashem tomorrow night. And then the next night, this is so sad, we're going to be starting our final parak.
Oh no.
Okay. If anyone has yet to sign up for the Siyum, please let me know. And looking forward to celebrating together with Hashem shortly. Having a great night.